Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, the slow TV radio podcast from The Meeting Point for students of English not only in Bilbao but throughout the world. Of course, this week we are on holiday, so there is no topic of the week and there is no celebrity guest speaker. But we do have suffix of the week and another phrasal verb joke. But first, some pronunciation. All of these words in front of you end in a T. And all of them usually have a silent T. These are words that come from French, and as they are fairly recent arrivals, we tend to use something close to the French pronunciation. So, for example, we don't say beret, we say beret or beret. Sometimes the stress moves on a lot of these words. We're not sure whether to put it on the first or second syllable in a lot of cases, but one thing we all agree on is we don't pronounce the T. So, beret, buffet or buffet, cabernet, a type of wine, croquet is a game, gourmet, not gourmet, but gourmet, sorbet is that iced dessert, ballet, cabaret, chalet, that also has a sh at the beginning because it's French. Crochet has a sh in the middle because it's French. Debut, ricochet also has the sh in it. Bouquet, bidet. Filet sometimes in America. We usually pronounce the T in England. We say fillet. I think it's an English word, but in America they like to pronounce it as if it's French and say filet. Then there's this word valet, which is sometimes valet, sometimes valet. Depot has a silent T, and a fish which I call a turbot, but apparently in America I've seen restaurant programs where they call it a turbo, which sounds very strange to me. I call it a turbot, so I pronounce the T on that one. So there's a few there with question marks which might vary between Britain and America, but generally speaking these are recent acquisition words from French, so we try to do something like a French pronunciation. Now it's time for suffix of the week. Not often we have a suffix of the week, but this was one that somebody asked me about last week. Wise, wise. It has a few meanings. The first one I thought of was in the direction of, but it only goes with clockwise or anti-clockwise. So clockwise is in the direction of the hands of the clock in a circular motion. So we have clockwise or anti-clockwise. In America they say counterclockwise, in the opposite direction of the clock. There's another one that means in the manner of, so we've got likewise, meaning in the same way, and otherwise, meaning in a different way. You've probably seen those words before. And then there's another strange one, this is how it came into the conversation, was in terms of or regarding. So we have words like money-wise, time-wise, etc. These are very common in spoken English, but you don't normally see them in written English. And it's often when you're asking someone how they are, and you're talking about your life, you can say, well, health-wise, I'm very well, but work-wise, I've got a lot of problems. That kind of thing. So it's regarding money, regarding work, regarding health, that kind of thing. We use a hyphen and then we add wise on the end of these words. And you can do it with lots of words regarding anything, really. So there you have an interesting suffix of the week. Jail and prison are synonyms, but jailer and prisoner are antonyms. That's a curious thing. A little curiosity, something I was looking into this week. A little while ago we were talking about guts and how we associate guts and stomach with courage and bravery. So you can have the guts to do something, but we can also use it to refer to instinct, like you have a gut reaction or a gut feeling. So this is going back to very old medieval ideas about anatomy and how things work inside our bodies. They also associated your liver with courage and cowardice, and this is why we have an expression to be lily-livered. It's not an expression we use very often, but you see it in westerns and films like that. He's lily-livered, meaning he's cowardly, because they thought if you had a very pale coloured liver, it was a sign of cowardice, because your liver was the place where your bravery came from, as well as your stomach. Your spleen was related to anger. I don't even know what a spleen does, but it's one of those bits inside your body. And now we have the expression to vent your spleen is to express anger. And of course, blood is often referring to your emotions or your temperament. So we can do things in cold blood. We can have bad blood. You can say, it makes my blood boil when you're very angry. And of course, the most common one that still survives today is the heart, being the seat of emotions and love. So you can be broken-hearted. You can be a kind-hearted person. And of course, Valentine's Day, we often send little cards with a very stylized image of a heart on the front, because we associate the heart with romance. So that's an interesting thing, that we send a little card with a heart on it. Imagine if someone had to be very brave, would you send them a card with a picture of a liver on the front? It's an interesting idea. Maybe we should start doing that. Why don't scientists believe atoms? Because they make up everything. Okay, another phrasal verb double meaning here. To be made up of things is to be composed of. If we're talking the ingredients that you construct things out of, you could say that atoms make up everything, because everything is made of atoms. But also, make up is to invent, especially stories. So this is why the scientists never believe atoms, because they make up everything. As I said, we had no classes this week, so we won't have a monologue on the topic from our celebrity guest speaker. But as a special treat, we have a true story for you. But before our celebrity guest speaker reads the story, I'll give you a little bit of vocabulary that appears in this story. Dawn is another word for sunrise. It's more the changing of the light in the morning. A scout is a person that goes out, especially a military person, that goes out looking ahead to see where the enemy is, or to look for food or something like that. They go out looking for things. Schnapps is a strong alcoholic drink, often in Germanic countries, kind of brandy type thing. Tempers rose means the people got angry. A shot rang out means somebody fired a gun. And bolted, to bolt, is a verb that means to run away. So horses often bolt when they run away. So there's a little bit of vocabulary, and here is a true story.
In 1788, during a war between the Austrian Empire and the Ottoman Turks, a large imperial army marched through the countryside near the town of Karansebes in present-day Romania. The Austrian army was exhausted after days of marching. It was cold and dark, and everyone expected an attack at any moment. The army stopped near a river and set up camp for the night. Before dawn, a group of cavalry rode ahead to scout the area. Instead of enemy soldiers, they found local traders selling food and barrels of schnapps. Relieved and bored, the cavalry bought several barrels and began drinking. Soon they were laughing, singing, and enjoying the rare chance to relax. Later, infantry units arrived and saw the drink. They asked for some, but the cavalry refused to share. Tempers rose. The soldiers argued. Someone pushed another man. Then, suddenly, a shot rang out. In the darkness, a voice shouted, "The Turks are here!" Panic spread instantly. The Austrian army was made up of men from many regions who spoke different languages. Orders were shouted, but many soldiers misunderstood them. Some thought the enemy had already entered the camp. Others saw shadows moving and began firing their muskets. Horses bolted through the tents. Cannons fired blindly into the night. Within minutes, the entire camp was in chaos. Smoke filled the air. Men ran in every direction. Units fired at shapes they could not identify, often hitting their own side. Fear grew stronger than reason. The shooting continued for hours. When morning finally came, the ground was covered with dead and wounded soldiers. The truth was slow and embarrassing to accept. No Ottoman troops had attacked. The army had fought itself. A few days later, when the real enemy finally reached the area, they found the Austrian camp empty and abandoned. Without firing a single shot, they had already won. All it had taken was darkness, confusion, and a barrel of brandy.
I hope you enjoyed that little story there from our celebrity guest speaker. And I noticed that story actually includes the word scout, which is something that came up in conversation fairly recently. A scout, you might have heard of the Boy Scouts, this organisation for kids to get involved in. They're supposed to go out camping and lighting fires and tying knots and things like that. It's actually quite boring being in the Scouts. I tried it for a while when I was about 12 years old. It wasn't all I expected it to be, but there's an organisation called the Scouts, and they come from that military idea of a scout. And in the modern world, we have a thing called a talent scout. Talent scouts back in the 60s and 70s worked for record companies, and they went out to local concerts to look at local bands performing to see if they could find some good musicians to sign up for the record label. Now, talent scouts work for football teams, and they attend school football matches looking for young players that they can sign up for the team. So the word scout still exists. It's a very interesting word, I think you'll agree. And that's about all we've got time for, really. Don't forget, coming up If you don't know it already, classes are starting next week, and I'm sure you are raring to go. Yes, raring to go. I think that's a horse expression. It means very enthusiastic and keen to do something. So, I hope I'll be seeing you back in class this week, and of course, if you're not a member of the Meeting Point, have a good week. Till next week.